Policy and Governance Committee. And so the first item on the agenda is the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the April meeting.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Okay, so going into discussion items, and if you guys are okay with that, I'd actually like to do number 1 fourth and just move everything else up 1. So we can go over those policies first and then hit that one, that topic. You guys okay with that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, so appendix 3 is the MIS schedule.
Which we revised. So for those of you that, like me, couldn't follow it,
Okay.
if you boot it up now, it shows by cycle of year. So if you start at the bottom,
No, it
14,
doesn't.
15. Who's laughing? Why?
Because the old one's there.
Yeah. it's-
Yeah,
almost
oh, it's
there.
up there, because I'm like, it's not updated.
All right, I'm gonna put a new one up in just a moment.
You know
Okay.
where it is? Under agenda setting. Oh, no, it's not. I take that back. Sorry.
That's, yeah. No, that's the
No.
old one too.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll get the new one up momentarily. Let me just
Okay.
tell you, when you do pull it up, what you will see is the batting order starts 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17. You then see a dark line start over again. 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. And the way it's set up, you have ends policies, legally mandated policies, appendices, board governance, board superintendent linkage. Can't read that upside down. Oh, participation by the public at board meetings, superintendent directions, and other. And then they are on a 3-year rotation. IASB says that best practice is for the board to review all of their policies over a 3-year time frame. For us, that's a bit of a challenge because we've got all these columns.
Mhm.
Most districts have one that says board policy.
Oh, wow.
Ours doesn't. Now, keep in mind, ours are 8 small binders. Most boards are 1 big binder. So it's not that there's that much more or less work on here. It's just much harder to follow. So I will get that uploaded for you shortly. But the other thing that we did on here, we did this purposely, was because the other one, it's hard to see what's been done
Yep.
and what's not been done. So when I load this for you, it'll show you that for the 17-18 school year, you can see which things are already done.
Mhm.
So then that hopefully gives us an idea of what needs to be done. So if you give me just a moment, you talk amongst yourselves, I will get you a new one uploaded here. Sorry, we uploaded that one and then Kim and I were having a hard time figuring out what was done. So
So
I
that's,
just-
is that in the agenda setting, this board policy review schedule?
it
Kinda
will
has
be, that's
what's
the
done.
old one. We're
Okay.
gonna put the new one up momentarily. As soon as I find it.
Yeah, why don't I have?
Minis. Let's see if this is it. Hot dog, got it right here. Right. Oops. Come on, man. I'm not doing case update, but I'm not working much faster than that. Hang on just a second here. I've got too many things open on my screen. All right, now let's go into MIS. And let's delete this one. Okay. This one. All right, if you hit refresh, you should see that now under item number 2, and momentarily I will have it at the bottom also. Oops. So if somebody happens to see it there, if you just confirm with me, make sure
Yep.
I did it right. Excellent. All right. There we go.
Yep.
So you can see if you look at 17, 18, math and science are done, 600's done, appendix 2 and 6 are done. This is appendix 3, so that'll be
Okay.
done after tonight. And then we've got 2HIJ under directions and 2A through H under governance. And that's on tonight's agenda. So there you go. Like I said, for Kim and I, we were having a hard time tracking it under that old chart. This one, now
Yeah.
it's all laid out, hopefully much easier for everybody to follow.
Yeah, it's very simple and easy to follow. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Although, as Kim and I said, maybe it was a waste of time, because maybe we'll make a transition this summer and I won't have to have all those columns, but that's all right.
Appendix 3, the MIS schedule, is the list of when the meetings, or the things show up on what agenda.
Oh, that's,
Yeah,
I was thinking,
yeah.
I was like, the one that was up there was.
That's- I'm like, wait a minute.
It's not there anymore.
See, that's where I got confused too, interchanging the
Okay, I
two,
see
so
that.
it's that, yeah.
This,
Says who's given what presentation at what meeting,
So
and,
this one should be under item
this is
one.
an agenda
this
setting,
is it.
or under item one.
Most likely under agenda setting, because we always know what else do we need to cover. And that's
Yeah.
what-
Okay. So he needs to put back the attachment
will.
that was there. Okay.
are you looking for the other one? I can move this.
Yeah, do you have the other one handy? I got it right here. if I can-
Mine don't, but I'll take this one out and put it in agenda setting.
While you're putting it up, you notice you did update it though, so it goes along with our new agenda.
It does.
You know.
Yep, sorry, that's the one that's in my drive here, so I'm just gonna pull that up under board. And save it.
What is going on here?
So when we go
Wanna
through,
read that up?
there's this one and there's a couple of the ones coming up, but we will look to have this approved for this upcoming year, and then years after that, we'll have to go back and change it again, because our organizational meetings will happen in November, right, for election.
Yeah.
They will.
right.
And as I'm getting this up, so one of the things that you will see is that we have tried to, which demo? Oh, there it is, sorry. You'll see in there that one of the things that we have done is we have moved as many as possible of our, there we go, reports into single meetings so that you don't have them spread out all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
All right, hold on. Yes, schedule. There we go. And the one that is not right now is the program of studies. But conveniently, when we move to the November organizational meeting, program of studies will fall in there.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that program of studies, if you want to try hitting refresh, it should boot up for you right now, maybe. Says mine's loading.
Check it.
There we go. Take a look at it now. You should have, it's got three
Yep.
red columns on top. I'm going to hit the plus button there a couple times to get it to be a legible size. And that's, see what happened, they got all these tweets with me. I grabbed the wrong one. That's this one, right? So yes, it aligns with the board meeting now. So you got presentation, discussion, action, summary up above, and then you can follow them down below. The team was awesome in putting this together. Took them a long time. We went through and looked for redundancies in reports. We got rid of those that are redundant. You'll see at our next meeting on the 8th, there's a whole bunch of reports on there. And when we met during the agenda setting meeting on Monday, Janet and Lori and Kim and I talked about that. So I've sent out a note to all the folks reminding them, you need to have your report uploaded, you need to have your 6 slides uploaded, you do not have to run through all your 6 slides when you do your presentation. Please make sure you hit the key learnings. The board will have time to look at those things ahead of time. You're going to ask for questions and answers. We're trying to streamline that process so you're not sitting listening to the reading of the memos. We don't need you to do that, nor do you want to do that. So, all right, now I got the right things in the right place. And I've gone through all my handouts. I'll leave on a high note.
Do you guys have any questions on that?
No.
Mm-mm.
It's pretty straightforward, just
Yeah.
gives us an idea what
Mhm.
everybody
Yep.
knows, so you're not going, when is this go live?
Right.
Mhm.
All right, I think that one is good to take to the board in the second meeting
All right.
to look at, so we will put it on there for the first meeting, so they can see it, right?
Yep.
And then look for approval on the second. Okay, moving on.
Moving right along.
Board governance. This one,
just kind of who you are. So this is a, what's the board and how does it work type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
First off, I was asking if anybody had any questions on it, secondly, we can kind of go through it, but any initial thoughts? There are some things as I started reading through it again that kind of maybe jumped out a little bit. No original comments, we'll just start at the top.
Okay.
So board governance, I think that was pretty straightforward, level one. Level two, issues with that one. I think, honestly, a lot of the stuff, when I read through this again, was that I just think it's good stuff that we need to review as board members every year, because I think sometimes we get, maybe lose sight of what our role is. I know we all went through board orientation, which covers, you know, a lot of this stuff again, but I think even as, after going through that, you may forget some of this. This also refers to a lot of the appendixes that we have. For example, school boundaries, school maintaining. So I'm just kind of going down, so as I read through them again, if anybody has any concerns, please bring them up.
Kind of a question on 2G.
You said 2G?
Mm-hmm. Committees.
Is it at the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have one number 4. Board committees will not be used to monitor organizational performance. Just what's that getting at? What's it mean?
Now you're moving into the world of Carver governance.
Okay.
So that's a key term. I did not make Paul read the 5 books that I got out when he came in to say, let's talk about Carver governance. And I got a whole bunch of books if you want to. You can check them out from the library.
Okay.
You might not want to. I do a little tiny primer if you want to see that. But one of the things that's a key process, this used to be called the MIS because it was the monitoring schedule.
Okay.
So your job as a board wound up not being to take action per se, but to
Mhm.
monitor what was being done. And so
Okay.
you see that word monitor in there a lot. So one of the reasons it says it in here is because if you read Carver, Carver will say that all monitoring should be done at the board table. So therefore, no reports essentially should be delivered at a committee meeting. So if you actually truly follow Carver governance, and Kim would remember this from when we had the Iowa City Community School District and the Des Moines Community School District hired a consultant that worked with both of us because they were also nominally a Carver Governance Board. And so we were sharing a Carver Governance expert to come in and work with us. And he was pretty adamant that we shouldn't have an education committee, we shouldn't have an operations committee, that you were allowed to have an audit committee and a committee that oversee the evaluation of the superintendent. Was that it?
I think there's only 2 or 3.
That might have been the only 2 committees you were allowed to have, were audit and superintendent evaluation, CEO evaluation. That the rest of the committees shouldn't exist because that work should take place at the board table because the full board should be monitoring whatever the district was doing. So, and that's where we run into a problem because if you sat here for the last half hour and listened to the work of our operations committee, if you ever come to education,
Equity.
Yeah.
If you go to our committees, you'll find that whether they're board committees or they're advisory committees, there's a lot of monitoring going
Right.
on. And I shared with Paul, and one of my conversations with the board when I first came in was, I think Carver governance is an excellent structure for the United Way or some nonprofit that meets quarterly kind of thing. Their board, Skypes in because they're in Timbuktu or wherever they're at. For a school board that's elected by constituents who expect to hold their elected officials accountable, Carver governance is a really tough process. I can't imagine you having a committee meeting where you're not allowed to do any monitoring.
Yeah, well, and my experience has been equity is probably a good example. It's efficient. You know, you can have an equity committee meeting and you can sort of really dig into stuff and hash it out, and people can, and
Sure.
then you bring that back to the board, and it's a
Get
much
reports
more
from the
clean.
administrative team,
Yeah.
go through some data.
Yep.
So-
And I can't imagine doing that all at the board table. We would be here always, forever, every single
Well,
meeting.
and again,
Would you consider that a board committee or
this talks about in terms of board committees. Actually, Carver would say you should not have advisory committees. So they would rule them out entirely. But keep in mind that the way Carver governance is set up, the best way to describe it is it's like the highway. You have the rumble strip on one side and you got that wall on the other side, and there's 3 lanes on there. And technically, I can drive as 100 miles an hour or 5 miles an hour. I can drive in the right lane, the middle lane, or the left lane. I can drive with my lights on or off at night. I can do anything that I want to unless you prescribe me from doing it,
Mhm.
right? And so that's why we have superintendent directions. They were called limitations at one point in time,
Right.
because they're things that prescribe me. You shall not drive slower than 50. Okay, now I know I can drive between 50 and 100. Well, you don't want me driving that. I have to write another prescription. Thou shalt drive faster than 50, but slower than 65. Thou shalt drive in the right lane, you know, those kinds of things. And Carver governance would tell you that you essentially just hand your CEO the reins, and you come in and monitor your CEO quarterly, periodically. You don't have committees, because they're not monitoring the committee. And as long as I'm in between the lines and I'm not driving too slow or too fast, it doesn't matter what I drive, who's in the car, unless you prescribe me from doing those things. So that's why I think Carver struggles in a publicly elected setting. And, you know, I digress a little bit, but that's so you understand
Mhm.
where that sentence about monitoring comes from.
Okay. Yeah, because that was, I was like, struck me. I'm like, what's
Yeah.
happening all the
You
time?
read through this, if you read the Carver governance books and then you start reading this stuff, you see a lot of that in
Okay.
there. And what you'll find is many, many contradictions with the way we do business.
Yeah.
So,
I guess, well, the reason I wanted to go through this before we had that discussion, because if we don't switch the way we're doing things, then at least we've gone through all these first, and then, you know, if we decide as a board to switch, then we can go away, but I want to make sure we cover all of it
yeah.
first, because that's what we're
Well,
supposed to do.
just to give you an example, if you're here at the end, actually, I guess it was more towards the beginning. We had a long conversation about whether or not we should be taking things out for bid, right? Service contracts. Well, state law doesn't say you have to take service contracts out for bid. The board governance structure doesn't say you have to take contracts out for bid. And Phil was really frustrated by that, but again, I'm driving between the strips at a speed that's designated by the board, so I'm in 100% compliance with what the board directs me to do. The way to change that then is you've got to write a prescription in there that tells me what to do. So the difference between that and Carver governance, or in board policy governance, is board policy governance is more affirmative rather than the thou shalt not. It's written in the thou shalt.
Mhm.
You shall have a process for creating an RFP for service contracts, whatever it is. So, just a different way to look at it.
Mhm.
And what it does is it actually prescribes more control to the board.
Mhm. Well,
which-
that's what, we are elected. That's what the community, their
Exactly.
perception is that.
That's their expectation.
It's their
Not even just a
expectation.
perception, it's their
Yeah,
expectation.
that you're gonna come in and do stuff or
Mhm.
have an impact.
So you're right, I think, you can look at it in light of why was it written and what is it there for, from a public governance perspective, and then recognize that as part of our larger conversation we get on the road there.
I mean, I don't have any problem taking out the phone.
Well, if we're gonna, to me, it's like coming to understand what it's there for, and as I kind of see how this is related to Carver, and if we're throwing the bathwater out, that baby's gonna go with it, and
Exactly.
and then we'll just, because that to me, it's always seemed very, some of the stuff is so convoluted, limitations, thou shalt not, and how you do mental gymnastics to essentially say the same thing you want to say is, we want you to do this thing.
Well, then Kim will remember this, the board was really struggling in one of our previous iterations with the thou shalt not language, so they tried to change them from limitations to directions, and so they tried to change them all to thou shalt.
Mm.
Well, some of them didn't translate very well, and boy, oh boy, was that a struggle,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Telling me that I can't drive slower than 50, how do you change that into a thou shalt? Right?
Yeah, right.
Because all of a sudden, okay, thou shalt not drive slower than 50, okay, thou shalt drive faster than 50. Oh, wait a minute, I don't want you driving 100. So they really struggle as you go through here. So you find some even more bizarre wording perhaps than what used to be there.
Any other ones on there? Otherwise,
Nothing else really jumped out at me.
The language as written is very, in here, is very congruent with Carver. And I know Joe's been through this before, so just for your reference, if you look down at the bottom, we've been pretty diligent about doing our reviews, and so you can see 15, 12, 11, so we've gone through that process fairly regularly.
yeah, and this will be another one that, if this does go forward next year, we'll have to look at it again, even though it's not on the schedule, because
Right.
there is that mention of the annual September
Mhm.
meeting,
Right.
which will need to be changed. Alright. So again, I can put that one on the agenda, May first meeting, and hopefully people will read it, and that'll just be a good refresher, if nothing else. Before we go forward. Alright, superintendent direction 2HIMJ.
One of the things I think it's important to note about the superintendent directions is that they're a little bit like Appendix 5,
Okay.
in that you can't go through Appendix 5 and do the zoning and meet all of the criteria that are in there, because some of them are simply contradictory,
Okay.
right? So we have some things in here that, while not always contradictory, certainly are going to be contradictory in the near future because of our state's wonderful funding of public ed.
Mhm.
And that is, if you scroll down to one of our more recent editions, which is in H, and if you look at, if you're down in 5 and 6, I'm sorry, in J, 5 and 6, they talk about balancing our attendance areas and then our class sizes. But then if you go back up to, no, I always think it's D, but I want to make sure. Not D. Where's my unspent? Let's see. I'm in these too much that I can't remember which one's which.
Oh, the unspent.
C, yeah. If you look at the plan to maintain unspent unobligated balances between 5 and 10%. So some of the things in here essentially dictate expenditures,
Mhm.
right? If we've got to try to either rezone to meet those needs, or if we have to try to create class sizes in those schools that are in compliance with 6 down there, but then trying to maintain an unspent unobligated balance that's above 5%. So we struggle with those. So there's some things in here that can be inherently contradictory. So those are just things that we have to recognize, because one of the problems with this is it's giving me 2 different directives that I can't meet both. So then one of the challenges is, which one do I meet? And again, Harvard governance would say, that's my decision alone to make. I personally don't think that's appropriate. I think that that's something that should be debated in an open forum by the board. And the board will either say, and Kim can remember, we had this conversation when the state zeroed us out on funding. The board actually passed a resolution saying it's okay to go below 5% in order to maintain programming for students. So we went down, and then they directed me as part of that to build a plan to get us back up.
Mhm.
Well, we're gonna be at the same place next
We're
year.
gonna be in the same place, yeah.
Exact same place.
So
next year.
is that a resolution that exists, or is it something that we'd have to pass again, or is it just
You
out
have to
there?
pass it again, it had a sunset on it.
It has sunset,
Yep.
okay.
It gave me the latitude to do it for 2 years, but then a plan
Okay.
to build it back in over 5, we were actually able to meet that in 3.
Well, we already have that.
Yeah,
I mean, Craig's already got the numbers that show us coming back up
Yeah.
after that dip.
yeah. So we're struggling with that internally right now because we're going through staffing. You know, so on the one hand, Craig's looking at it and saying, oh my God, you're gonna violate C, and you know, you need to rein back on the hiring. Then I got Amy and Matt saying, oh my God, you're gonna violate, you know, 6 down here. Which one do you pick?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's certainly what I will support and vote for, is to especially because we know, you know, we can see the plan's already there. If it was continuing to go down, or there was no plan,
Right.
then we'd be a different story. But we can see that it's a dip, and we can plan that it's gonna come back up.
Yeah, but that dip was prior to, I think, some of these staffing issues that came up.
Oh, yeah, part of that.
So the dip is even
Yeah,
deeper.
Deeper.
yeah,
So-
and that's where Craig's starting to sweat.
Yeah,
right?
and that's what, yeah.
So I think, again, good language in here,
Mhm.
good idea, let me take that back, maybe it's not the language per se, the ideas, there's some really good stuff in here. If we were to move to a policy governance thing, process as opposed to the carbon governance process, much of the intent would continue, might be rewritten, might be more directional, and might require more monitoring, to use that word again, from the board at the board table.
And that I feel we do pretty well on the budget end. I mean, we're seeing those numbers regularly in a couple different ways.
Yeah, and maybe action would be a better
Okay.
word there than monitoring, so that there would be more of a requirement that the board has more of an activist role
Okay.
in setting some of those priorities. And I know if Lori was here, she'd express some of the frustration in that, because she feels like in many cases the budget gets delivered to her and she doesn't get to muck around in it while we're doing it, and that's part of this process.
Mhm.
And that's part of the frustration, going back to your comment about you're an elected representative of the community as a whole, should you have a more activist role in that process? And board governance, as the ISP defines it, would give you a more activist role.
Yeah. I have a question about 3J5. And when we look at special ed, you know, that I kind of rub up against that a bit, because my understanding of special ed law is you should get services wherever, right?
Got to keep in mind, when this was written,
Yeah.
we had a much higher percentage in the district as a whole, and much like ELL, we're more center-driven
Yeah.
in our instruction, so we have more kids being bused to programs.
Right.
And so there was a real concern at the time, both for our ELL students, because now none of us even come close to this from that standpoint. I brought my sheet somewhere. I had it. When you look at that now, for our special ed, our highest special ed buildings, 12, 8, 14, 13, 10, 9, 9.
Right.
But remember, we've gone down about 3.5%
Right.
in our overall
12,
special
about
ed
9.
population. So we don't run up against that as much. Plus, we've decentralized a lot of services.
Right.
So only our tier 3 kids might find themselves in situations where they're being transported to education. And that's
Mhm.
usually only because we don't want to isolate them in a program by themselves in a building.
Mhm.
So there's far less instances of that than there used to be. Same thing with ELL. Next year we'll have ELL in
In all
every
the
building in the
buildings.
district.
Right.
But when this was written, it was only at City, it was only at Southeast.
Yep.
The other secondary schools didn't have it, most of our elementary schools didn't have it. Next year, everybody will have it, so. Now, that doesn't prevent some of our ELL numbers from being really high just because those neighborhoods are high. That goes back to the whole zoning question,
Mhm.
so.
Does-
Go ahead.
No, yeah.
I had some more up in the twos. Oh, two, in 2A, and then level, where it says 2A, and superintendent shall level 3A, number 7. Do we need to update that now that we have a new process as well, instead of just appendix 6?
Oh, we probably want to reference the.
I was gonna say, I thought we met that now that we,
Right, but I think there's,
The one thing that is not included in here is the new process for non-represented employees. So we
Okay.
would need to add that from a
Yeah.
parenthetical. That's pretty
oh,
straightforward.
in the parenthetical.
Yep.
I see, right, yep.
also looking at 10 and 11 in that section.
Yeah, I was gonna bring, like, should those be upgraded?
Oh, yeah. That would be good.
Okay, now, just for reference for you, if you look at the district historian, Kim, gotta help me out here, Sarah Swisher, 12, 13? Yep. So we enacted for a very short period of time a diversity policy.
Oh, I
And this actually is a relic of that
Okay.
process. Because this was the directive that they put in to hold me accountable for
That
completing
policy.
that diversity policy, which is no longer in existence.
So do you need to go?
Which is why I just mentioned it doesn't just need to be.
It needs to be
cut,
eliminated,
those
yeah.
two.
Cut out completely and not try and incorporate our current diversity?
I would say that it's redundant to what's down below in 3J5.
And just, sorry. You said 3J5?
Yes,
Oh, the attendance, okay,
right, because the one that you're referencing was actually specifically related to our zoning process. So that equity policy that board enacted at the time had, I was supposed to bring to them each year in June, new attendance zones that moved us closer towards the goals that were established in that equity policy. So this was the mechanism to make sure that I brought that forward to them every June.
I mean, I'm thinking that if we, because I think the intent behind, the intent is pretty similar behind all the, we're going for a similar thing, but maybe we could craft that would reflect what we're doing and thinking now. Because some things like, even socioeconomic learner status, 50%. What if the Great Recession happened and all of our schools were 57?
Yeah.
Just the economy.
Yeah.
So some of this is kind of arbitrary, like. So what I guess what I was thinking, and I kind of seems better, is within a certain, within no more than so many points of each other, right? So whatever this school is, if everything goes up, they're going to be within
Right.
whatever that number is of one another. That way it's
Well-
not just setting this, it's going to be 50%, which,
What you're looking at is that idea that you set a floating
a range.
range.
Yeah, so
that
between.
you stay tight,
Yeah,
right? And that's a really good point, because since I've been here in 8 years, we've only had one school that's seen their FRL numbers go down. Other than that, at some point in time, I'll have to share this with you just for entertainment. This is the FRL history of the district,
oh wow.
going back to, I was able to assemble it back to 99. So just for your reference, in 99, the district total was 18%.
Yeah, right.
District total this year is 38%.
Right.
So we're gonna continue to see a growth, and that means that eventually those targets will be unreachable. So, and that was the original equity policy, was designed to try and create this standard deviation thing, where we're
Okay.
supposed to stay in there, and that's what that one that we were just talking about up above, that's what that references. But I think you're right, I think it would give us an opportunity to maybe review how we have that set up and what that might look like over time.
Because with this one, you could have a school at 50 and then any other school at 2, and that meets the policy, even though that's a very, huge
wide range.
And I'm hopeful, and I don't know how to codify this a little bit, but what we're doing in special ed and ELL, I think those are best practices and what's best for the kids, and I'm hopeful that and I know, like just special ed, just because I've spent so much time talking to Lisa, that's kind of her philosophy, and she's pushing hard for that, to
Yeah.
get the programs where the kids are instead
Right.
of moving kids to programs.
Right.
But that can change, depending on who's there.
Right.
But it's hard with these arbitrary numbers. Thinking you're the one kid who puts you over 21%, and now you're, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, that was actually a question that was asked after these got put in place by a building administrator, was, does this create any in economics we call them perverse incentives, to make bad choices about students in order to stay underneath the thresholds. Would you deny a voluntary transfer request if a student fit a certain category, even if you had an open seat in the building?
Mm-hmm.
And that was brought up by a couple of our building principals as they were reviewing it and thinking about whether or not they would be in violation, and then what impact might that have on their. We had one person that said, would you rescind voluntary transfers that had already been granted if they took us over those numbers?
Yeah, that's
Those are
why
good questions to ask.
those hard numbers. I like ranges. I like giving discretion, professional judgment. Not just to say,
Give it a try.
yeah, or you're not really doing it. But yeah, I never want kids to fall under some arbitrary number that now we're making a decision on you based on your.
Right.
Wow.
All right, so backtracking a little bit to the 10, 11 number.
Sorry, yeah, 10, 11.
Since they really, we either need to change them or we need to take them out. Because we don't have a diversity policy.
Mhm.
Right.
I know, so that's fine, we can propose to take them out.
So we take those two out, we can add that parenthetical reference.
And as we're moving down, number 13 on that one too, was the word to reduce the number of non-contiguous attendance zones. So
Okay, this is from the
well,
agenda.
yeah, this is, history again, but this is where we had a lot of islands, and
That's
especially
called
in
islands.
North Liberty, and we're finally getting out of those with new schools.
We had all kinds of islands. We had the island that's the Lake Ridge development over by Colonial Lanes. We had Longfellow Island. We had all these islands all over the place. Pheasant Ridge was bused past Horn to Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Roosevelt.
So there are a bunch of things like that. So one of the things, this is the Jeff Guinness rule here. Jeff had said essentially don't ever bring a map that has an island again. And so that's where that came from.
Yeah, and I'm.
And I disagree with this, which is why I would like to remove
Yep.
it.
I
Because
disagree with
Technically,
it too.
I'm in violation of this when we brought forward the plan that took Kirkwood to Liberty.
And Alexander to West. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well,
No, yeah, and
Alexander's contiguous. Alexander, I got contiguous. The river's
Oh,
in the way, but I got
'cause-
contiguous.
oh, I see.
But Kirkwood is not contiguous.
No.
So that's a violation.
But there's some other areas that I think that we have that if it makes sense to have an island exist, that we should work to reduce it.
What about Corvo Central? Is that a little bit of an island when they come down from Lincrest and Lori's?
No,
neighborhood?
because the
Because it-
definition of an island is
Oh.
not a physical barrier.
Okay.
So we're allowed to separate things by the highway, the river,
It'd be like,
etc. We just simply can't have two pieces that are not physically connected.
Currently, we have kids that go to Longfellow that live past Scott.
Oh,
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Breckenridge is an island
Yep.
that
Yeah.
goes to Levy.
Okay.
Pheasant Ridge is still an island.
And Garner, our Penn
'Cause
students
they're going to Weber.
technically
Oh,
are
Weber.
an island that far north part of
Right,
River
the
Ridge.
Cedar Springs and Fox Run are an
Yeah.
island.
So instead of eliminating it, can we tweak the language? Because it sounds as though, there's good cases for us to have these islands, and if the language sort of speaks to that, instead of, work to reduce the number doesn't work. We know that.
We could
But
say something like,
even if you tacked on, work to reduce it, when it detrimental to
I guess
a child's
something like
educational.
that, or if it doesn't violate this other
I don't
policy.
know.
I guess my thought is, like, I don't know. Me personally, I don't think we should even consider it. Like, an island makes sense for what we're trying to achieve with balance or whatever it is,
Mhm.
or whatever it is, then we shouldn't work to reduce them. Like, we need to get rid of
Yeah.
them.
Wait, you said we need to get rid of them?
No, I'm saying, like, in his direction.
Oh, okay.
we have to
Right,
get rid of-
that we have to
so
work
for
to get-
example, in 19, when Breckenridge gets moved to Hoover to eliminate this island, it brings the FRL of.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's the truth. When you look at and as you dig in more of this and get into the history, and this is me too. This is my evolution, from having this concept of neighborhood schools to really come to understand what that means in our community. And then the history of that was very much neighborhood schools was dog whistle for you're not bringing those kids into my neighborhood. And so, and I don't, I don't know if people are aware of that in the community, but yeah, the truth is those new maps make some things worse
Yeah.
as far as socioeconomic balance. And so I would say Jeff McGinnis is no longer on the school board, and so
Does live
Maybe-
in town.
or live in the community.
I think, I honestly would like to remove it, and as we work through our attendance zones and our retreat or whatever it is, if we decide that we have language that we want to add in, then that can be put back in.
Okay.
Or
Yeah, I'm-
revised.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
That
Definitely.
honestly, there's two areas that I can think of that I've said a lot now to make things worse at schools.
Yep.
Eliminate rides.
Yep.
All right, then, as I was putting down, about communication. It's in 2G. It's just number 4. I just want to make sure that people are aware of that one. It kind of was discussed a little bit at the end of the board meeting, but it's something that we've talked with.
2G.
Yeah, 2G, level 3G, number 4.
Okay.
It says make available without delay negative information regarding the district's performance, staff, and public image.
Okay, sorry. 2G.
Well, it's actually-
Actually, it's 3G4.
It-
Yeah.
Okay, under 2G through G4. Got it.
I don't want to change it. I just want to.
Make
Bless you.
available without delay negative information regarding the district's performance, staff, or public.
And that's to the board. Make
That-
available to the
that-
board.
Oh, okay.
Because it falls under communication.
But it
to the
doesn't
board.
say.
Okay.
Because it falls under.
Well, but
2G.
number 3 says inform the board.
Yeah.
We could say make available to the board. Just a,
I mean, or go back and get rid of the redundancy of in
Of
the other
inform
one,
the
of
board,
report,
yeah, fair
right.
enough.
Because it is part of communication with the board.
So then we'd have
some
to
of
clean
it
up all
is
those.
redundant, 3, 2, and I don't know what 1.
yeah, one
And
regular
1
to ride the
have
board.
all
yeah,
have
meet
language
the board.
that's sort of redundant based on the topic of this item. And I'm fine with 3 as is, but as I sort of skipped the highlight of communication and support to the board, I was like, wait, make available without delay to who?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that encompass?
What does 4 encompass?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, seriously,
Okay, so here's another Carver thing. So anything that is ambiguous,
mm-hmm.
then I define until such time as you don't like the definition, and then you define it. So I have the liberty of determining what's negative information, what's without delay, what's make available, what's district performance. I suppose staff is pretty much we all agree on who works for the district. Public image, that's mine. So I operationally define those. So I'll give you a for instance. So today, we got a creeper at Twain.
Oh,
so
yeah, right.
that we send a message out to Twain. I send that message that goes out to the Twain parents to you. Now, in all honesty, I don't do it because the policy says it's in here. I do it because I want you to know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Is that negative, not negative? I don't know, but I think that actually is probably more appropriate to you're informed up top.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that I pay more attention to that idea. But
And that is good. I mean, that's the kind of thing you don't want to be caught at the supermarket.
right.
What? That's
happened?
not. Yeah. I
Well,
didn't-
especially if police get called to the site, I want you guys to know
Yeah.
why they're there.
So we're changing all the other ones.
Or just make, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't think it's,
pressing, because now that I'm reading it, regularly provide, or to get, it doesn't.
although I think if it said make available to the board, it just removes ambiguity that people, and even though it's covered, I think, in that top, it definitely removes ambiguity. So people don't pull that out of context and say, well, look at this.
Because every other one.
Does say
every one
board.
says board somewhere.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it does, so we should add board,
Make available to the board.
because, I mean, the way this reads, make available, so if you just notify president and vice president of something, would that you be covered under
Maybe.
this point? That's why I think it's probably important to put, make available to the board.
Okay. No, Kim?
Got it.
There's one more that I had. You guys have something else I need to find it first, which is confusing the way it was written.
I have one that's down a little further. Sorry.
Go ahead. You can tell me.
It's 3A. I guess no, maybe it was up a little further. Oh, it's another one that refers to the diversity policy. I'm getting a little confused with this. 2B, 3B, 3A, 10, diversity goals for grades K-8, 20% progress.
Yeah, I think we did do
We
that.
just
Okay,
yeah,
we
we did
sorry.
too many
Never
together.
mind,
Yeah.
my notes are, okay.
So we're good.
So
We
we're
got
good.
rid of both
Well, the
of
good thing
them.
is
We
you
got
found
rid
it
of
too.
Yes,
So how many
I just
people
had
yes,
it
that's affirming.
written weird. Yes.
I just had a question. Under 3C, 6, would we have to come back and review that depending on the final passage of SAVE?
3G6.
I don't know.
This is
No.
3C6, I think. Is
Yeah.
5%, 10%.
3C6.
Yeah.
Yeah, what'll happen is, so we forecast where the budget will finish for next June.
Okay.
So what we do as an administrative team is we look at it and say, now our goal is to try to make sure that when we get to next June, we're not. And this is what happened last time around, because of course the budget gets set, right? And in that case, the year was zeroed out. You'll remember this was July. We tried to set the budget, the board had passed, we hired everybody. I mean, we were ready to start school in like 4 weeks, and all of a sudden they zeroed us out. So then we get to the end of that year, and as we get closer to the end of the year, we know we're going to be below that limitation. So then that's when we come back to you as a board and say, we're closing in on the finish line, and we project, because that year we made a whole bunch of adjustments along the way. We delayed some curriculum adoption, we did some other stuff like that to try to squeeze as much savings as we could between then and June 30th. We still fell a little bit short. We went to the board, we said we're short, we're gonna be short again next year, what do you wanna do? The board said, we don't wanna get rid of staff, we don't wanna cut programs. We're gonna pass a resolution that we can be under it again next year.
Okay.
So that's, because it's a forecasting issue, Ruthina, more than anything else. We're not below it now, but we anticipate we might be.
I found my other one.
Found your other
It's under
one.
asset protection, which is level 2E.
Yep.
And then the superintendent shall free, it's number 3.
Number 3.
Maybe, yeah, just read it, I don't understand it. You can explain it better, but it just sounds very confusing to me.
So, one of the things that, and we don't suffer from it as much here in Iowa as many other states do, because we have things like PEPAL and we have SAVE. Most states don't have that. Most have what they call unitary fund streaming, which is everything goes into one bucket. I can hire teachers, or I can build buildings, I can hire support staff, or I can do improvements to the roof or the boiler or whatever, and I can do it all out of the same fund. Well, what happens is when budgets get tight, you tend to go to people and not stuff. California's a perfect example. Their infrastructure is deteriorating because everything's deferred maintenance. And what this simply says is, I'm not allowed to choose to defer maintenance on a building and let it suffer.
I mean, I think I understand it, but I just wonder if suffering and from are switched. It should say from suffering instead of suffering from.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because I don't understand it the way it's written, but if you put it from in front of suffering, then I understand it.
yeah.
I think
I
you're
can see that.
exactly right.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't author these, so I have no pride of ownership here, so that's an easy one for us to fix.
Does that make sense to anyone else?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. And then another one that I just want to make sure people are aware of is 3, our communication with support with the board. It's number 3.
Number 3.
And it's not that I want to change anything on there, I just want to make sure everyone knows it's
Wait,
there.
which one?
3G3.
3G3.
3D?
3G.
G.
It's inform the board whenever it is in her judgment. The board is not compliant with its own policies regarding governance and board superintendent linkages. And the only reason I bring it up is because we had, in the past, this has come up and things have been, where Steve has informed us that maybe in his judgment, we didn't comply and there was some disagreements that he should do that. And I just want to point out that it is in there, that he should do that because that's what's in our, that's what we're directing him to do. That was all. Just wanted to make a comment about that.
Mhm.
Other than that, I don't think I have anything else in the ones that I went through, so. Good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, can you make those changes?
Yep.
And then we feel comfortable with those changes moving forward, or do you want to review it again in the future?
No,
Review it
actually-
again. Oh, no, I think we
No.
can send this to the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Kim will make, she always makes good changes. And
Well, I tell you what, why don't we do this? We'll redline it out. We'll send it to you. You guys can just take a look at it.
Okay,
Okay,
that'll be nice.
that's fine.
What's
Yeah,
in there?
perfect.
Does that sound good, Kim?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right, with that being said, the next topic is the next policy and governance committee meeting. And
We're so much better than operations.
We're so much what?
Better than operations.
Oh, record. Yeah, that's record.
so we have covered everything that we are supposed to cover in the year.
Thumbs up on that, by the way. If anybody wants to, and I'm on record here, so he can listen to it later if he wants to, but if anyone wants to, give Brian Kirschling a call. Let him know that you finished up your work in
Wow. Nope.
in May.
Is
You
that
were out
because
first.
he had
Oh,
problems?
we met in the summer.
There was a lot
There
of.
were some arguments about semicolons
Yes.
and things.
We met in the summer, Ricky.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think the last policy and governance committee meeting last year was the Tuesday before your election.
Yeah,
Or the Tuesday of the election.
yeah.
It was something like
Yeah, I
that.
think it's the
We were
Tuesday of
rushing
the
big,
election.
Long
We were
arguments.
rushing to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, congratulations. Nice work.
Yay.
So, we can set the agenda for the next meeting, which wouldn't happen again until,
Are
September
those
4th.
meet in the summer? Yeah.
September 4th. So.
But wait, aren't we supposed to, before we go to agenda setting, weren't we supposed to talk
Oh, you want to
about
talk
whether or
about
not?
board policy
Oh,
structure?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I wonder, what happened?
Skipped.
And I'm like,
Supposed to keep us on track.
we have to go back to that.
Board policy structure.
Yes.
So this would be one that I'll let Steve talk about, but if this is something that we choose to pursue, then this is something Steve and his team will work on over the summer, so this meeting.
So I think you've heard from Joe Holland before on his personal preference for governance structures. Kim and I have had lots of conversations with IASB about this. IASB is a firm component of policy governance. Right? We want to write good policies. Policies dictate our actions. Ideally, we would have policies which would mirror those that the IASB recommends. They work very closely with the Board of Ed, with the Department of Ed, with the state legislature to make sure that everything is aligned and compliant with any changes that happen in those three branches of government. And then there will be some policies that we'll need to localize, and those would be policies for which you would have an appendix. Phil's question is always, what are these appendices to? We would actually write appendices to policies that would localize things that we need that are specific here to Iowa City. And then if there are administrative guidelines that we need to implement the policy or the appendix, you would have that. So you could think of it as a nested process. Now it's not, but it would be policies, appendices, and guidelines connected to it. We actually think that would be a relatively straightforward process to move towards. We've talked to Joe about it. He's very willing to step in and help us out. And Crystal's had some experience doing this too. And that's something that we could work on over the summer with the idea that we'd have it ready for you in the fall when we came back. And if you look at our, Joe would like to take a white gas and a match to it, but if you look at our board policy page, and you're out there.
Painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had it up, but I mean, literally, we would be looking at all those pieces that are on there. So if you go through there, we've got ends policies, board governance, appendices, superintendent, language, superintendent direction, participation by the public at board meetings, legally mandated board policies, and administrative guidelines, and we look at moving it to those three areas. Probably bring in a skeletal framework for you and recognize that we'd have to then chew through those, so that would take the place of what we have in here.
Okay.
But it would give us that opportunity to make sure that everything that needs to has a home. Part of what Joe talked about doing was, if you take the IASB policy manual and then line it up against ours and simply peel away the pieces of ours that are already there, then you'd see what's left. Which of those then would need to be appendices under our new policies? Keep those. Which would be guidelines that would go underneath that, keep those, and then if there's anything over here in the leftover pile, then we take a look at that and see what we do with that.
So, given if we all agree, wouldn't we have to, that's where we want to head, wouldn't we have to take this back to the full board to have them approve?
Yep,
To go towards this?
and I think that's why
Okay.
I think we'd want to do
I
that
just want to
before
make sure.
you do the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I want to make
Absolutely.
sure.
I think that's why that
We're on
was
the same
delegated
page.
here, because
Yeah.
Kim and I had this very same conversation with Janet and Lori during one of our agenda setting meetings, and they said, oh, before we say you should do that, we want P&G to talk about that and decide whether or not that's something you would recommend that we do, and then it would come through P&G to the board table, and then the board would say, go for it.
Do anybody see concerns with that?
I haven't heard one champion of Carver.
I mean, Steve and I, we did have a meeting because I think there's some language that when you say Carver governance, it is a policy governance model.
Right.
And we're looking to move to policy governance. So what's the difference between Carver governance
And
and
policy?
this policy governance? Because sometimes Carver governance is policy governance.
Right.
So we had a conversation last week on Friday. I mean, like I had my printouts and kind of went back and forth. So I know one of the benefits of Carver governance is that we aren't supposed to micromanage.
Yep.
And in policy governance, we get into a lot more
Yep.
micromanaging,
Yep.
which is a concern to some.
And then
But-
that really becomes a board norms issue then.
Right, I mean, but can't you sort of, the way we write our policy, write it with that in mind? I mean, that you're not leaving it open to the micromanagement?
I mean, I think the thing about micromanaging is it's always going to be a danger that you dip into, and there's always times when it comes up, and I mean, we do it now. I mean, we micromanage all of the time, you know, and it's not always the worst thing in the world. We certainly don't want to make it, like, I don't have the time in my day to get, I mean, I figure we pay you all money to do these things, and that's the point. But then when things come up where you're like, so I don't want to micromanage, but then I might want to know the details of some of the minutia that help me make a better decision.
And you know, one thing to think about too is, right now, we write all the administrative guidelines. Unless you go down to the bottom there, and I imagine hopefully you have other things to do, you're not down there reading all the administrative guidelines, there's a lot of stuff in there. But literally, we write those to try to match what we think you want to do. And so from that micromanagement standpoint, I would argue that one thing that there is, from a tool standpoint, that would really give you an opportunity to lead from the board is you write the policy. If there's something localized, we've got an appendix there. And then how it gets implemented is the guideline. And if the guideline has issues, then we at the P&G table will revise the guideline. So it's closer to the work than the policy is, but you don't necessarily, you're not doing the day-to-day stuff. But, you know, to Phil's earlier comment about the work with whether we bid or don't bid stuff. Policy says we don't have to. State law says we don't have to. That's above the policy, right? State law says we don't have to. Policy says we don't have to. But he's looking at it saying, but wait a minute, I don't think that's the right thing from a community standpoint. Well, if the board decides that's the case, you can change the policy, or if the policy is intact the way it's and it's appropriate the way it is, you just write the guideline in such a way that it ensures that the policy is carried out to meet the expectations of the community. Guidelines are a lot more flexible and easily changed. So, you know, you sit here at this table or the ops table and you say we need to change this guideline. You just tell me to change it. I change it. We're done. So I think there's room for you to avoid the micromanaging, but be closer to the work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds a lot more straightforward.
And be very responsive to the general public.
Right.
Which I think is really what many people in the community are looking for. They probably don't want you to micromanage, but they want you to have a little more control. Personally, I don't have a problem with that. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you get to pitch that. I'd be more than happy to jump in. I will not be long-winded, I promise, on Tuesday night. If you throw that out there, and I'll be just brief and let them know. I know Joe's very interested in this. In all candor, there are times when we're doing something and I get the call from Joe that says, oh my gosh, I just found this buried in a different policy over here. I've been doing this one because I think these policies are in contradiction with each other. So, all right.
That's great.
So, with that being said,
September.
well,
We may be doing this,
Well,
or
the question to that then becomes, in September, we have a meeting September 4th, which would be technically the last meeting of us as a policy and governance until you re-up again.
Oh, right. So it's just a one-year
Instead
deal.
of starting into that again, I think that if approved, we would only have a meeting on September 4th to discuss this item.
Right.
Yep. Right.
progress made over the summer.
Yeah.
Yep. And then anything else, you know, Phil's on about fraternization. I think until we make these changes and we get our policies streamlined, there's no sense monkeying with every little
No.
piece and finding every little thing.
You know, I did go back and look at fraternization, and we've done it twice this year.
Yeah.
So when we looked in the minutes, you know, we talked about getting
I think we had
a
to,
larger group together.
yeah, because we can't, it's not something that, I think from the last meeting, any of us felt comfortable
It was
in
like-
trying to craft and
Yep.
tackle without more experienced input. Because we
And-
talked about having Joe at the table, we
Mhm.
talked about having a couple of different other
Well, we
representatives
talked about
from
having
ICA.
SEIU.
So that's, I think, for the next cycle of P&G to.
Well, and especially doing this first.
Yeah,
Getting
we
this
have to do that
streamlined
first.
and then we know. Because the other thing that we came across with that one was we had like 3 different policies.
Right.
In different places.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the question was, well, why are we doing this? And it's like, well, we really need to bring the full board to say what. So I think, anyway, on all of it, this comes first.
Yeah.
And then we can deal with
we can
what
go
comes
back,
out.
And
because
then-
I think you're right, we did have a question for the board. Exactly why are we tasked with this?
Right.
Where does this fit in?
And there's a lot of apprehension in our organized labor groups about it.
Yeah, right.
Because remember, one of the things we did was we loaded all those pages from the university.
All
Yeah,
kinds of.
and
They
people
went
freaked
through and
out.
looked at those, and there were a whole bunch of things in there that they said, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Whether it
What
was
about this?
spouses or parents
Kids,
and children working
mhm.
in the same building,
Right.
which may have been prohibited under some of the things that were in the university guidelines, and so there was some,
Yeah.
we got some immediate feedback from the association about, hey, before you go any further, we
Yeah.
might like to have a little conversation with you about this.
So our chairperson just needs to remember this conversation for if it comes up at our next board table.
Right there?
But we're not gonna have the minutes there.
Oh,
Minutes
true.
are at the board table.
What?
They're on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll tackle that at the September 4th meeting. So I guess that's agenda setting.
There you
That's
go.
right. So we will have this meeting on September 4th. If the board,
Wait, September
Yes.
4th?
September 4th, right after Labor Day.
Right after Labor Day.
No.
Right after
I
Labor Day.
can't.
You can't.
that's why we have alternates.
We have alternates.
Sorry.
Because if we don't do it, then you just throw it to a new policy and governance.
Does it have to be on September 4th?
Well, what day would you like it to be?
Well, otherwise we,
The 11th and the 25th.
What are you doing on the
board.
5th?
Wednesday.
Okay, is there a policy written that we have to meet on Wednesday? I'm just,
It's the fall policy that Tuesday is for school boards.
fine, but no, seriously, I can't be at,
you're out.
that's my husband's birthday.
Oh.
I'm not gonna
Oh,
be sitting here
yeah.
Angie.
Probably a good choice.
Just bring him here.
Yeah, what better birthday? Jesus.
I'll wait to turn off the recorder since he is an ICCSD employee. But honestly, I don't think I can make September 4th. I mean, if we did,
Well, keep in mind, all we'll be doing at the 4th is just reporting out the work we did over the course of the summer.
To show the new,
I can call in.
the new streamlined.
Which
Yep.
will be on board docs, so if you have any information to
Yes.
input, you could input it.
Okay,
to us before.
fine, September 4th.
And I think the alternate is Janet, so
Right.
I
Mhm.
assume she would like to sit in on that meeting anyway.
Sure, September 4th would be great.
But the one item on the agenda,
There you go.
So that means we can meet earlier too,
We
Maybe.
could.
instead of a 6 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Oh, no.
N-
Don't
No, I
you-
can do it.
no.
Operations is meeting on the.
All
Oh, that's why,
Well,
yeah.
make
Yeah.
it flip.
no, I didn't.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
do I have to follow operations?
They can follow.
Because they have more staff.
Right,
They do have more
exactly. So
staff.
that's why we should go first and operations can go, because if we have one item on our agenda
We'll be
and they have umpteenth,
We will be efficient.
Full seniority on,
or not.
chairperson, seniority.
Put that in the minutes.
All right,
Oh, God.
can I move that we adjourn, or do you have to call for that?
You can move to adjourn at any point during our meeting.
I quit. I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.